Hi students and welcome members to today's live IELTS class. I hope everybody is having a great weekend so far. Hi CO Goose, hi Valiant Venture. I'm Arjeet, good to see you in class. Roshni, great to see you as well. Waiting for some more members to join in, that's fantastic. All right, so today, members chat class. Of course, if you are a member, you can join the chat session, and everybody is welcome to view. If you want to become a member, it's a good idea to improve for the IELTS exam. Just click the join button beside the subscribe button. If you don't see it, send me an email. I'll show you my email in a minute. These lessons materials come from our websites, aehelp.com for the academic version of the test, and GIELTS help, that's general IELTS help.com for the general version. You can also look for our Shield in your app store, search for academic IELTS help, download the app, link your website with your app, and study anywhere, anytime from 6 original practice tests, over 100 hours of video lessons, and a fully interactive course with strategies and tips for high band scores. Students, if you have questions, send me an email to Adrian, ADRIAN, at aehelp.com. Hi, Alexander Kisi, Sheng Hung for Dovs, and Pretian Zainab. Good to see many more students coming in from around the world. Welcome, members. I think some from Russia, Saudi Arabia, India, and China, among others. Great. All right, students. Today is this question and answer. So this is an interactive class, members. Hi, Rehan. We will focus on punctuation. One of our members said, can we do a class that's kind of on punctuation? So these periods, commas, quotation marks, because they're a little bit confusing, and they are confusing. They're confusing even for native English speakers as well. So I'll talk about that a little bit. Then after this class in 90 minutes for everybody, we will finish that task 2 essay that we started yesterday. So the body paragraphs and the conclusion. Okay, that was Valiant Venture that requested that this class on punctuation, and it's a good request, Valiant Venture. So again, those people who are members, you can request topics, all right? And Valiant Venture, that was a good topic request. Okay. All right, so firstly, where do we use or where do we see punctuation in the IELTS exam? So this will be questions and answers, mostly from you members, but I will also ask you some questions like this one. When do we see and use punctuation in the IELTS exam? Roshni says dates, but specifically, Roshni, to make my question more clear, what sections? Yeah, very good. So Valiant Venture says writing, and Kisi very cleverly says it's not just writing, it's also reading. Yeah, so this is seen in the listening section questions, reading section, and the writing section, and task 1, task 2 writing. Okay, here's another question just before we get into these specific punctuations. Is punctuation important for IELTS scores? So what do you think? Is it important, and how important is punctuation? So if you don't use a comma properly, or if you don't use a period well, or a question mark. Yeah, so okay, so your inferences for Dobbs and Shanghung Seoguz, you're right. Yeah, definitely. It does. So punctuation has a significant effect overall on your scores. If you completely ignore your punctuation, you can lose a band score, maybe even more. Why? So Kisi says, well, it affects fluency and clarity, yes. So you're right. So, yes, because punctuation defines, or you can say controls, diction, fluency, coherence, intent, okay, and intonation. Actually, let's go intonation and enunciation. So, punctuation in the IELTS exam has an effect on all of these parts of communication and speech. Diction means the style of speech, the style of expression. Fluency means the flow of the language. Coherence means the clarity of the language. So it definitely has a lot of effect. Yeah. Valiant Venture says it regulates intonation. That's what I have here. And you can actually see me using punctuation already. So look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So look at all those punctuation marks in just that sentence there to give you clarity on what I'm writing. So that's definitely important. All right. So let's take a deeper dive then into these punctuation marks with some examples. And then we can discuss the members. So this is a Q&A session. It's a question answer session, okay? And so just stop me any moment in time. I will do my best to catch your questions as we go along and discuss each of these. So read with me a little bit. Now, of course, I'm going to do more than just read instructions for you from the board. I will go into more explanation where necessary. Okay, here we go. So there are 14 punctuation marks that are commonly used in English grammar. They are period 1, question mark 2, exclamation point 3, comma, semicolon, colon, dash, hyphen, parentheses, brackets, braces, apostrophe, quotation marks, and ellipses. Okay, so those are the 14 types of punctuation marks commonly used in the English language. Following their correct usage will make your writing easier to read and more appealing for your audience. Clearly, it will help you with your band score. Okay, let's start with the first group here. So we'll look at these, each one in a little bit detail, and then as questions come up, I'll explain them, okay? Roshni, ellipses, I'll explain that, okay? So I'll explain to you what a ellipses is, and I'll explain which ones you should use in the IELTS writing and which ones you really don't need to use, okay? Sometimes I see students using punctuation that is unnecessary and even incorrect in the IELTS exam. So I'll show you those as we go along, okay? So firstly, pay attention to sentence endings, okay? So 3 of these 14 punctuation marks are appropriate to use as sentence endings. You see them used here, the period. They are the period, the question mark, and the exclamation point. Now, punctuation, there are some similarities in some languages, okay, like English and French, and there are some differences, like using question marks in English and Spanish, for example, okay? All right. So just a couple. So these ones I know most of you are quite familiar with. So I'll just explain the common mistakes with these. Okay. So the period is placed at the end of a declarative sentence or declarative sentences. Statements thought to be complete and after many abbreviations. Okay. So here you have the period ending a sentence. Jane and Jack went to the market. All right, very simple. So Jane and Jack is the subject, went is the verb, and market is the object. It's a full sentence. Therefore, it ends with this period. One of the common mistakes that I see students make in their writing, and I see many students especially from Arabic language backgrounds, doing this, where they have a space after the last letter. Okay? And notice how immediately the grammar check in Microsoft Word underlined it in blue. It said, hey, wait a second, you can't do that. Okay? That is a hard rule in English. You cannot have a space between the last letter of the word and the period. To an English speaker, that looks awkward. Okay, so that's a common mistake that I see. Is that clear? Is that space after that's a very common one that I see in many students task 2 paper-based writing. That will drop your band score if you do that for the sentences. Okay, if the examiner sees that in every sentence you have the wrong spacing for your periods, it will drop your score. Okay, you think, well, that's crazy, that's so mean. But it will, because it's awkward, unnatural English writing. No native speaking English student will make this mistake after grade 1 or grade 2. Okay, so it's very awkward. Another mistake that I see is no space after. So students just starting the next sentence. Jane and Jack went to the market. They bought some fruit and vegetables. Okay? Another common mistake using the period. No spacing. So market, period, right away, big T. All right? That is, again, incorrect. If you do this in the exam, you will lose marks. Is that clear with that important piece of information? There has to be a space. Okay? Now, in modern writing, here's an interesting little piece for you. In modern writing, we put one space after the period. But in conventional or traditional writing, and I think this might be even a British-American difference, I'd have to check for you, but there is a double space after the period. Not for commas. Notice how grammar check didn't underline here, that it didn't say, hey, wait a second, you just put an extra space there. It didn't say that. Because in traditional writing, we will actually double space after the period. That is okay to do. Just make sure that you're consistent. Okay? And it's only with the period that you can do that. You cannot do that with a comma, colon, or semicolon. Okay? It is only with the period that you can double space. So if that works better for you mentally, some authors like to do this because they have clarity on the separation of their sentences. Okay? Especially some people have really tiny commas that almost look like periods. So in that case, you might want to do a double space when you have periods. Is it clear about the double single space following the period? That's kind of a unique rule that many, even native English speakers, are not quite clear or familiar with. Yes, you can, Valiant Ventures. So that's what I'm saying, Valiant Ventures. You can use the double space after the period on the exam. Just make sure that you do it for every period. Okay, make sure that you leave a very clear space there. Okay. All right, so remember the double space. So using a double space after a period is okay, but only for periods, and you must be consistent. So you can't have a single space in one sentence, a double space in the other sentence, because that looks awkward. Being consistent with punctuation is very important. So having consistency, okay, in your punctuation is very important. So if you're doing commas, you don't want to do a comma like this and then do a comma like that and the next one's like this. Okay? So you need to make sure that your comma is consistently a comma. Okay? It's consistently the same or at least very similar comma, and you're not changing it to different looking commas. Commas should always slide backwards, not forwards. Okay? Consistency is very important. If you have different looking punctuation throughout your essay, again, you will lose marks. Okay? Consistency in punctuation is important. Okay? And you should make sure that your commas and periods are different. That's sometimes very awkward with some students. Okay. So we use periods after abbreviations. Okay, abbreviations is when you take the short form of a word. So after an abbreviation, her son, John Jones Jr., okay, that word is junior. It's abbreviated as JR, was born on December, so here December is abbreviated, 6, 2008, and that's the period ending the sentence. So again, make sure to use the period for abbreviations. Okay? That's why when you write time, AM or PM, you should write PM like that, because these are actually abbreviations. Okay? I always forget what they abbreviate, but they are abbreviation. Okay? So AM is the same. So if you want to be very technical, those are abbreviations. P is a word, M is a word in this case. So Roshni says, but in the paper-based exam, it is hard to give a period so close. It looks like a space. I'm not sure what you mean, Roshni, but in the paper-based exam, it's very important that your period is clearly a period at the end of the last letter, and then there's a space or two spaces after, Roshni. If that's not clear, send me an email, but it has to be that way, okay, when you're writing on paper. All right. So let's keep going. We have a fair bit to cover today, and I'm not going to speed through it. Don't worry. This is an important lesson. Worst case scenario, we shift some information to another class. So using a question mark to indicate a direct question when placed at the end of a sentence. All right. Here we go. Here's an example. When did Jane leave for the market? Okay. Now, do you use question marks in the exam, in the IELTS exam? So, in the IELTS, should you be using question marks in your task 1 or task 2 writing? Thank you for Dovs. Post meridium. Yeah, I always forget. I know it's post, but I always forget the meridium. So thank you for that, for Dovs. Roshni says, yes, we can, but we don't really use them. Okay? So some people put questions into the introduction of task 2. It's not a good idea. Okay? It's not a good idea to ask questions in task 2 because your goal is to answer a question, not to ask a question. So you shouldn't have questions. You really don't need question marks in your writing. The only place where you really should pay attention to question marks is in the listening section, questions, and in the reading. Okay? So you don't need question mark. You don't need to write question marks in the IELTS exam, so you don't need to worry about it. If you're a general student, general IELTS student, then in your task 1 letter, you might use question marks. So keep that in mind. I recommend only using it there. Okay? So the only place you should be using a question mark is in task 1 letter of the general exam. Okay, that's the only place that you should really be using it. Here's an example. Let's say you're writing to a friend, and in the letter you're trying to inquire about when they will come to visit you. So please let me know. Or here, let me rephrase that. Will you have a chance to visit us in the near future? It would be great to see you soon. Okay, so something like that in general IELTS task 1, you might use it. Like, will you have a chance to visit us in the near future? It would be great to see you soon. That's about the only place where you should be writing question marks. Okay? Otherwise, you really don't need them. Okay, and then the third punctuation, which will end the sentence, is the exclamation mark. Okay? The exclamation mark is used when a person wants to express a sudden outcry or add emphasis. Okay? I'm going to give you a little bit more here. Emphasis, or is shouting at the audience. Okay? An exclamation mark, you're exclaiming. The verb is actually to exclaim. And when you're exclaiming, you're actually shouting. You'll see that a synonym for exclaiming is you're shouting. Okay? So should we use exclamation marks in the exam in task 1 or task 2 of the general or academic? Preeti says we rarely use it in IELTS. Yeah, again, it's very similar to the question mark when you're persuading, or when you would never use it in task 1 academic when you're describing a chart or a graph. It's just awkward. What is another way to exclaim? So let's see here. We have a couple of examples. So within the dialogue, we can go, "Holy cow," screamed Jane. Okay, so this is a "holy cow," screamed Jane. My mother-in-law's rants make me furious, right? So again, it's make me furious. It's exclaim. So there's a definite enunciation here where I'm going up with the decibels. So I'm saying it louder. If I want to emphasize the word furious even more, so let's say that I want to emphasize this word even more. Okay? Aside from the exclamation mark, what can I do? Again, yeah, Valiant Venture, you're right. We might use it in general IELTS for sure. So what can I do if I want to emphasize the word furious? So I want to shout even louder to my reader. What can I do? Maybe a double exclamation mark, perhaps. But there's another step that I can do. Yeah, so Ferdov says use a double exclamation mark. Yeah, and we do that sometimes. So we do a double exclamation mark sometimes, sure. Now, if I want to emphasize it even more, if I want to be even louder, if I'm screaming the word furious, what can I do? Or if I'm screaming the word holy cow, what can I do? And the reason I want to show you this is because, nope, for Dobbs, that's if I'm asking and screaming. That's again a different combination of punctuation. What I can do is I can do it all capitals, like this. Okay, so in English, when we want to scream something, we'll capitalize all of the letters. Well, holy cow! Sorry if I hurt your ears doing that. Maybe just, especially for those with a headset, I apologize. But that is how we do it. Okay, so that's how we exclaim even further, is by capitalizing. Okay, why am I telling you that? Because way too many non-native English speakers are using capital letters in their writing and in their email. Okay, and probably members, you see sometimes people using it in the chat also. All right, when I see that in the chat, so when I see people using these big letters, they're not just getting my attention, but they're screaming at me. And to be honest with you, it's kind of impolite. Okay, so it's impolite to shout your opinion to get attention. All right, so I really suggest to control using all capital letters, just like control using exclamation marks. People usually don't scream their ideas or their questions. Okay. Definitely, Preeti, it is a good way of explaining an exclamation. Yeah. So my suggestion is careful to reserve exclamation marks and capital letters to unique situations where you truly want to shout at your audience. And the reason I say this is because students often tend to shout too much. Okay? Especially in emails. Be careful in your emails. Okay? All right, so far, so good. So far, so good. Yeah. All right. So far, so good. And I can see that you're picking up what I'm putting down with a little bit of humor, which is great. Now we get into the realm of these little bit ambiguous or unclear punctuation marks. The comma, the semicolon, and the colon. Okay? And I'm just going to put period here for a second. In reading and in intonation, before we get into technical explanation, what is the difference between these punctuation symbols? So what is the difference when we're thinking about flow and intonation between comma, semicolon, colon, and period? Do any of you know? What is the kind of technical difference that's important to keep in mind? And this is the foundation for understanding these four and the differences and controlling them in your writing to have high quality writing. It's very important to start from this idea. So what is the fundamental difference? Okay, so Roshni says comma is to say the difference between others. Period is at the end of the sentence, according to Preeti. Rehan says to address the idea. Yes, Kisi, that's the answer I'm looking for. So members, look at Kisi's answer. So Kisi says half stop, a third of a stop, a full stop. Yeah, exactly. So it's the timing of the stop. So it's the timing of the stop. So a semicolon is the shortest stop. The semicolon and the colon are the longer stop, okay? And the period is the full stop. So this is the third stop. These two are the half stop. And the period is the full stop. Okay? That's how you have to think about it. That's the most important fundamental concept to first understand with these different punctuation marks. Third stop, half stop, full stop. Okay? Why? Why do you think that is? Okay, there's a very logical answer to this. So this would be like a quarter of a second, a half a second, 1 second. You can think about it that way. Okay? So quarter second, half second, and a full second. Stop. You can think about it that way. Why is that? There's a very logical answer for that, and it's very important to understand that, and then you can really use them more wisely during your writing, because a lot of this is subjective, so a lot of this is up to the author. There's a lot of flexibility in the rules with these. Okay. Ferdov says to attract the reader's attention. It's not bad. Roshni says to string together ideas, so put together many ideas. That's also good, Roshni, yeah. There's another answer that I'm kind of looking for here. You'll notice as we go through each of them that the reason for the difference in the stop is because of the relative connection between the elements that are given. Okay, I think that might be a little bit tricky to understand what I mean, but I'll explain that more clearly. Okay, so commas are used when there's a strong relative connection among ideas. So I went to the store and bought apples, oranges, and bananas. So there's a very short quarter-second break between apples, oranges, and bananas, and there are commas in there, of course. Now, the connection among the oranges, apples, and bananas is quite strong. It's a list of fruits. They're strongly connected. Okay? Semicolons and colons are used similarly to connect two independent clauses, so two independent ideas which are closely related to each other. Okay, so I'll give you an example. The dog barked loudly. The child jumped, scared for her life. Okay, so the child jumped, scared for her life, and the dog barked loudly. They're connected. The child jumped, scared for her life because the dog barked loudly, and I can connect those two independent sentences with a semicolon. Okay? So there is a relationship between those sentences, or a colon, okay? But I take a little bit of a longer break than with the comma, right? Now, when the ideas change more dramatically from sentence to sentence, then we use the period. If the idea changes even more, okay, what do I use? Yes, Preeti, absolutely. So separation and connection is the key here. So if the ideas change even more, where a period is no longer appropriate, then what should I do? What happens at that point, where even the period is not good enough because I'm changing my ideas so drastically, or I'm interested? That's right, CEO Goose. Very good. You got me. Yes, it's a new paragraph. So that's where we go with the new paragraph, CEO Goose. Absolutely. You drop to a new paragraph, okay? So the difference in timing and the difference in these punctuation marks fundamentally, most importantly, rest in the degree of relative connection within the information that you're presenting. Okay? It's very important to understand that. And so punctuation marks, just like connecting words, like therefore, subordinating conjunctions, however, if, when, conditionals, punctuation marks serve these very important functions in writing of having connections clear for the audience between and among ideas. Okay, let's take a look at these in a little bit more detail. All right. So, the comma, semicolon, and colon are often misused. They are. The comma misuse is the most common mistake in the IELTS exam that I see for task 1, task 2, and many students will lose half a band for incorrect use of commas, missing or incorrect use of commas. I would say about 90%. So keep this in mind as you study this. Now, I have done a class in the past about the 12 reasons to use a comma. Maybe I'll create a video for everyone on that. But keep this in mind. Roughly 90%, this is according, of course, to my experience. Which one's percent here? Just a sec. Oh. Roughly 90% of IELTS students will lose a half band score for incorrectly using commas and not using them when they should. Okay? It's a sad truth, but it is the truth. Okay? So roughly 90% of students, 9 out of 10 students, will lose a half band score by the end of their second essay for not using commas correctly. All right? So, practice comma usage. The comma is used to show a separation of ideas or elements within the structure of a sentence. Additionally, comma, after a leading expression, it is used in numbers, dates, and letter writing after the salutation and closing. Now, that is just part of the truth, okay? So it gives you a very condensed idea of comma usage. What I suggest is Google 12 rules for comma use, okay? So Google this and you'll come across the same information that I have presented in classes. So Google 12 rules for comma use. I don't want to go into that right now because that's a whole class on its own, okay? All right. So here's an example. Thanks for your help, John. Okay, again, there's a slight break there. Read with me. Thanks for your help, John. All right. Then for the separation of two complete sentences, when those two complete sentences are joined by a coordinating conjunction. We went to the movies and then we went out to lunch. Now, the reason we can join these two sentences using the comma and the coordinating conjunction and is because there is a strong relationship here. Went, movies, then to lunch. It's very, very clear. What are the other coordinating conjunctions where we can do this to join two similar or likewise sentences using a comma, space, then the coordinating conjunction? Ferdov says, but, yes, that's one. However is not. After is not. This is the realm of coordinating conjunctions, not subordinating. It's a closed set. Okay, some of you who have been my students for a while should remember this. Okay, so used with coordinating conjunctions to join two similar sentences. Okay, so we have and, we have but, yes. We have so, yep, showing cause and effect. Kesey, that's right, fanboy is the acronym. So what Kesey is saying is, everybody, you can remember it like this. For is one of them, yes. Yet, Sioguz is another one, yep. So it's for and nor, but, or, in Kesey it's fanboys, plural, fanboys. So for and nor, but, or, yet, and so. That's the closed set, okay? Those are all of the coordinating conjunctions. So remember it with F. So Kesey said that's the, it's called a mnemonic device. It's called a mnemonic device. So for and nor, but, or, yet. So fan boys, okay? Those are all of the coordinating conjunctions where, depending on the relationship of the two sentences, you can use the comma with that, okay? Something like this, I'll give you another example so that's clear with a different coordinating conjunction. So is used for cause and effect. I lost my keys, so I cannot start the car. Okay, that's an example. Here, it's not an additive concept, but it's a cause and effect, right? And it's not the same cause and effect as therefore. Amarjeet, you have to review your coordinating conjunctions. Preeti, same thing. Okay, there's three groups of conjunctions: coordinating, correlative, subordinating. Preeti, Amarjeet, although, whereas, those belong to the subordinating conjunctions. That's different. It's a different group. Same with whereas, Amarjeet. Roshni, while, also belongs to the subordinating conjunctions. So here you have these coordinating conjunctions, and for different kinds of situations. So I lost my keys, comma, so I cannot start the car. Two full sentences. I, subject, lost, verb, keys, object. I, subject, start, verb, car, object. Okay? Yes, Shang Hung Sai, those are very important to know clearly. Absolutely. Okay? All right, and then of course we use commas to separate lists in a sentence. So whether to add a final, or where am I? Here, separating lists. So separating lists or elements within sentences. Susie wanted the black, green, and blue dress. So here we have the black, green, and blue dress. Now notice the colon here. The colon is used to show an example. The example can use the colon because this is a strong related concept to the first concept. So separating lists or elements within sentences. Colon, example. Susie wanted the black, green, and blue dress. Okay. All right. You don't really have to use the colon in the IELTS either, or even the semicolon. Most of the time when students try to do that, they make a mistake. So I suggest not worrying about that for the IELTS. You can master that as you progress in your writing, but don't use it in the IELTS. You can get a band 7, 8, even a 9 without using semicolons and colons. Okay, keep that in mind. All right, so they're not necessary for high band scores. knowing how to use periods and commas, definitely necessary. Okay. Valiant Venture, which notes are you talking about? These notes here? Yes, absolutely, I save them. Yeah, I save them, and I do post them on the website, and much of this information is available in your premium course, Valiant Venture, in a much more concise, clear way. Okay. All right. Yeah, there's one little piece here. We can just quickly touch on it, but again, so whether to add a final comma before the conjunction in a list is a matter of debate. This final comma, known as an Oxford or serial comma, is useful in a complex series of elements or phrases, but it is often considered unnecessary in a simple series such as in the example above. It usually comes down to a style choice by the writer. And I think Alexander, one of our members, just in yesterday's class, had a question that was related to this. This is high-level writing. It depends on the intonation. We don't need to get into this. So what it's basically saying is that this comma here is not necessary. You can read this as, Susie wanted the black, green, and blue dress. You don't need another short break there. Now, that is up to the writer's choice. That's advanced writing techniques, completely unnecessary for students at this point in the IELTS to be familiar with that, okay? That is considered in, especially in narrative writing, or if you're writing novels as a professional and you're controlling the flow of the literature, especially in complex sentences. Okay. Yeah, Valiant Venture, what I will do in the near future is a lot of these notes from these live classes, I will create them as blogs on the website, and then you can grab them from there and print them if you need them. Okay. So I'll try to take care of that in the next couple weeks. All right, so let's go to the semicolon. Any questions about what we've covered so far? Any questions on what we've covered so far? No? It's clear? Okay, while you're thinking, let's talk about the semicolon. So the semicolon, which is basically a little period with a comma underneath, is used to connect independent clauses. Independent clauses is another way basically to say full sentences. Okay? To make life even more confusing, a lot of these grammar terms are just redundant. So independent clause is a full sentence. It's a sentence that can stand on its own. It shows a close relationship. This is what I'm explaining so far between the clauses than the period would show. Okay, so when there's a close relationship, here we go. The example. John was hurt. He knew she only said it to upset him. Okay, so John was hurt. He knew she only said it to upset him. The relationship between John was hurt and he knew she only said it to upset him, these two are very closely related in this narrative. This is a narrative piece of writing. Okay. Then a colon has three main uses. Now, the colon, interestingly, is also a substitute for the semicolon. Take a look, and then I'll give you a little bit more insight so you're not confused on which one to use when. Okay. And again, students, remember, punctuation at the highest level does become somewhat subjective for some of these. So you will have to decide on your own style. Okay. So the first use of a colon is after a word introducing a quotation, an explanation, or an example, or a series. So here we go. He was planning to study 4 subjects: politics, philosophy, sociology, and economics. Okay, So we use the colon. Is it absolutely necessary? No. Often what you'll see in today's writing in more modern forms especially is just a comma. Okay? So he was planning to study 4 subjects: politics, philosophy, sociology, and I'm going to take that out. That's that Oxford comma, and economics. So I can write it like that also. All right? Yeah, CO goose, you can say it like that. So you can definitely say that a semicolon is like a comma plus period. It's actually CO goose. No, I would say like this. So CO goose, the semicolon is equal to the period. Let me do it like this. The period divided by the comma. Okay. If you want to mathematically represent it, it's not additive, so you're not adding a period and a comma because that would be a full and a third of a stop, but it's not CO goose. It's actually a period divided by a comma. Okay, so it's more of a stop than a comma, but less of a stop than a period. That would be, so instead of the plus sign, CO goose, it's a divide sign there with the period divided by the comma. Okay, that would be a more accurate interpretation for the semicolon. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, to get back to point here, just briefly, on the IELTS exam, please do not play around with the semicolon in your official exam. When you're doing a list like this, instead of the semicolon, just use a comma. Okay, so he was planning to study 4 subjects, comma, politics, philosophy, sociology, and economics. Okay? All right? It's simpler, it's more smooth, it's more modern. You don't need to play around with a semicolon. All right? If you like semicolons, I recommend reading up on them more, getting more familiar with the unique cases where they're recommended. Okay? Here we go. The second is between independent clauses when the second explains the first. It's similar to a semicolon. So here we go. I didn't have time to get changed, colon, I was already late. Again, here you could use the semicolon. Okay, so you could do it like this. I didn't have time to get changed, semicolon, I was already late. Again, what I recommend is that in this case, you use a semicolon and not the colon. Okay? One of the places where we use the colon and not a semicolon or not the comma is actually here. Okay? Notice this colon here, and then you have bullet 1, bullet 2, and maybe a bullet 3 coming after also. In this situation, we would use the colon, especially when you create a list of phrases. Okay? But you don't do that in the IELTS exam, so you don't need to worry about it. All right? So here's my recommendation for you for the semicolon. Okay? You do not, the colon, need to use a colon during or in task 1 or task 2, as the comma and semicolon will suffice. Okay. All right. Now, in other writing, business writing and so on, you might need to do it if you're doing bullet forms like this, but you're not using bullet forms in your writing in task 1 or task 2. Okay, students, instead of rushing, because I'm running out of time now, and we're going to get into the other topics of using a dash and a hyphen, I suggest leaving that for next week, members chat class, maybe at the start of next week on Thursday. What do you think about that, Do you agree? Let's leave those ones instead of trying to rush into them, because I only have like 2 minutes, okay? And these are quite heavy topics, and you may use dashes and hyphens in the IELTS. So, okay, so we'll leave that for members chat class on Thursday, and then I'll give you some more examples there, all right? We're only about halfway through right now. And I think that was quite a bit of information for periods, commas, colons, and semicolons. Okay? Those are the most important ones. All right, members, thank you so much for watching. Everybody who's viewing this lesson, you can become a member by clicking the join button beside the subscribe button. And of course, to access a wealth of materials for the IELTS exam, check us out at aehelp.com and gieltshelp.com. You're very welcome, members, for the class. Alexander, there you are. We're just talking about those punctuations, and I mentioned you regarding yesterday's class. Valiant Venture, thank you so much for recommending this topic. Again, members, remember that you can recommend ideas for classes, for these members chat classes. That is one of your perks, and I'm really happy to go over such topics with you. That's it for now. In 30 minutes, we will continue our Task 2 essay from yesterday, where everybody will be able to join in. Bye for now. See you shortly.